We all know that roaming in Guild Wars 2 World vs. World can be an unforgiving experience. Whether you're getting pew-pewed by a ranger, hugging their wall like a long dead game they're nostalgic towards, being run down by a quote-unquote roaming squad, or getting tunnel visioned by a permastealth thief who is thirstier than an Instagram lurker. It's rough out there. No one likes to run back from respawn, and dying is the worst thing you can do for your team, but also playing like the stoop kid who doesn't leave 5 feet from their tower's doorsteps isn't that engaging either. The risk of open world PvP is what makes it fun, and being able to survive in the depths of enemy territory can be one of the more rewarding activities in World vs. World. So in this video, I will show you how to survive long enough so you can experience the fun of World v. World. Unlike in PvP where you can generally expect fair fights, World vs. World will often be imbalanced, unfair, and uncontrollable. So while cooldown management is important, nothing is more important than positioning and awareness. If you're running into fights that you can't win, it's either because you aren't paying attention to your surroundings, or you aren't going in at the right time. One way to increase your awareness is through the settings. Turning your camera point of view to maximum and enabling free camera is a must for maximizing your awareness. Also enable simple World v. World nameplates so you can see a colored icon above a player's head, allowing you to know instantly how many players from each side you're facing, allowing you to decide more accurately how risky the situation is. One thing I like to do is while I'm using a skill that has a scripted animation I can't control once it is set in motion, or a skill I don't really need to aim while using it, I will swing my camera around very quickly just to glance at my surroundings while not losing too much awareness on the current situation. If a bunch of enemies roll up on you from out of nowhere, it's usually not that they weren't visible, it's that you weren't paying attention. If you have that information sooner, you can start retreating towards safer positioning before they are on top of you and it's impossible to get away at that point. Okay, but what does it matter whether or not you can see a train that's coming at you before it hits you? It's going to hit you no matter what. To avoid or handle risky situations, you want to look around for terrain. You aren't just looking for enemies when you're swinging your camera around, you're looking for a favorable positioning. If the enemies are coming from the west, then find some terrain in the east to break line of sight or to get an advantage in the coming fight. Because so many skills in Guild Wars 2 have a defined range to them, they can be avoided using a specific positioning. For example, melee attacks are very short range, but they also have a narrow hitbox. This means you could be right next to someone and they can be facing you, but because you are slightly above or below them, they'll miss. So abusing the Z-axis is very important, and terrain is the easiest way to do this. Range skills are very common in World v. World because of how rewarding for little risk they are. Terrain that can obstruct line of sight is very important for handling projectiles. If an enemy can't shoot at you, they'll often get closer to you to be able to land their skills, but that means that they have to take a riskier position, which allows you retaliation opportunities. Many of the biomes in World v. World have trees, and these actually can be used to line of sight projectiles if you are very precise with your movements. Your jump key is one of the most important bindings for kiting and surviving because it adds complexity to landing abilities on you. There are so many objects and landscapes that you can jump on, hide in, and run around that I couldn't begin to show them all. I'll just show some of my favorites in the background while talking about it. Just know that there is always some kind of terrain nearby at every objective. If you're jumping up terrain, they also have to jump at the right time to follow you. If they follow you, they're moving in a predictable path, which makes it super easy for you to turn around and blast them, which can make them think twice about being so aggressive. Terrain should be thought of as part of your build. You can use it to bait your enemies, and every time you're in a dangerous situation, you kite on terrain instead of using a defensive cooldown. This will not only help you conserve your cooldowns, but will allow you to survive much greater odds. If you're still playing aggressively with all your high value damage skills on cooldown, you won't be trading damage very well either. So sometimes you want to preemptively kite just to buy time until you have those cooldowns. Running into open field is just asking to get gunned down. You allow enemies to not only have an easy line of sight to you, but you also allow them to port to you. Teleports require a valid path to the target, and knowing what is and what isn't a valid path can really help you to position yourself in World vs. World. It won't do much good in naming every single terrain that has or has not a valid path to the other, because that would take way too much time. Instead, I'll show you how to find out whether your spot is a valid path. Navigation Mesh, or Nav Mesh, is used in Guild Wars 2 to allow teleporting without breaking the game. If there were no limits to teleporting, you could go anywhere, so only on the Nav Mesh can you teleport. But you cannot teleport to a Nav Mesh that is disconnected to your current Nav Mesh. This is what the game means by no valid path. If the game cannot detect and trace a path from your current point on a Nav Mesh to the targeted location with no breaks in the Nav Mesh, then the port will fail. Anytime you have to use your jump key to get up a terrain and there is no possible path to get there by simply walking and not jumping, it means there is a break in the Nav Mesh. You may be able to port to anywhere on a Nav Mesh once you first step onto it, but you can't port onto from another one. If you haven't noticed already, strategic use of terrain is your best method of survival. Many players will go for the path of least resistance, so in a lot of cases, if you start doing jumping puzzles, players will find you too much of a hassle to chase. Even if they have the means and the resources to do so, they may lose the motivation. But players have differing amounts of persistence and ability to chase, and often you can thin out groups of enemies by using terrain, which can allow you to manage their numbers much more carefully. You may not be able to win a 1v3, but you may be able to survive it long enough until one of them gets tired of jumping around terrain with you and leaves you in a 1v2, which is much more likely to go in your favor. You want to be heading towards terrain as soon as you see any fight you aren't confident in. If the enemy won't chase you on terrain, then you've survived. If they chase you on terrain, you can bait them to tunnel vision on the jumps and turn on them while they're focused on their footing, or you may escape to another terrain nearby while they deal with that one. The more terrain you can use, the further you can extend your range of survival, which might be long enough until you can reach your allies or a safer tower to hide in. This is why mobility and self-sustain is so important for roamers, because they have to deal with these odds, and the ability to use terrain can actually supplement your sustain and allow you a lot more survivability. That is how you survive in small scale situations, but what about when you're in a Zerg with support and you can't just run to terrain to survive? You will be going against other large groups. Mainly, you want to predict where the enemy main force is going. There's usually a front line, which is where all the tanky melee characters are balled up, and a back line, which is usually a bit more spread out around the front line and consists of more squishy ranged classes. You can see where their front line is by where they are most densely gathered. Their commander is going to be within that frontline ball, and most of their group is going to be focusing on what the commander says and does. So whatever is in front of that front line is going to be in their most direct vision and therefore the most dangerous position. Keep an eye on the front line and always position yourself to the side or behind them. If you need to stay near your group to provide them support and receive support from them, learn your skill ranges and stand where your team is in between you and the enemy Zerg. If you do happen to be right in front of their front line's path, do not run straight away from them because you'll just get run over. Either go to the sides or dodge straight through them. Yes, I said through them. It's much safer to dodge through a Zerg than to run straight away from it. Most Worldview Worlders and Zergs are keyboard turning, so for them to attack what's behind them is a lot of work. Remember, players take the path of least resistance, so if you make yourself a difficult target, they will often go for your slower team members. You also know that the enemy team wants to pick off players that are around your team's front line. Staying close to your front line can be safer because you'll get much more support, but when the enemy pushes into your front line, you need to be moving out of the way because you're also in the most dangerous position at the same time as the most supported position. Coordinated groups in World vs. World will often use all of their big damage and boon ripping abilities in one area to bypass any support you could receive. This is usually called their bomb. It looks like a bunch of red circles, feels like a massive FPS drop, and is often done in choke points. No amount of sustain can survive a well-performed bomb, so positioning is your only way to survive this. But sometimes, even positioning isn't enough. Before the bomb, you will see certain skills that prepare a bomb, like pulls or other control skills like temporal curtain, gravity well, static field, and even stealth. If you see these, you want to get out of there. Use both your dodges to reposition if you have to, but if you do get caught, what comes next will be more radioactive than Chernobyl's red forest. Bring one source of escape, stun break, stability, or port just in case your team doesn't give you stability or it gets ripped. You should only need one escape because the enemy bomb will usually only happen every 30 or so seconds and you don't plan on getting caught in every bomb. So as long as you stay away from the enemy's clear path, save your defensive cooldown to avoid the enemy bomb, and regroup with your team when you need sustain, you should be fine. However, death is inevitable in World vs. World. You will die many times, and often those deaths will be out of your control. Of course, you can sit in your base and never die, or you can blame your team for letting you die, or you can actually think about your positioning, your cooldown management, and whether you could have played better. Also, while running back to your Zerg, try to stick together or take the less traveled paths, or you may get ganked. If you found this video helpful, please subscribe and like it, and if you wish to support me, share this video and check the links in the description. And I will see you guys next time.